10:02, and I'd like to call the meeting of the Architectural Barriers Advisory Committee to order. Okay, let's see. First roll of business is roll call. Philip Pierce is not here today, am I correct? Okay. Mike Olson.
Here.
Jim Durham.
Here.
John Ricard.
Here.
Brian Sargent.
Here, sir.
Rob Roy Parnell.
Here.
Ron Menard, that's me, here. Kathy Ann Riley.
Here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Michael McDonald.
Here.
Okay. I do believe we have a quorum on this, the 16th day of December. Alrighty. Okay, let's see. Before we get too far along into the proceedings, I would like to remind everybody that if you're going to make a motion or if you're going to speak, please state your name for the record so that our bookkeeper can keep accurate tabs on all of us. Alrighty, that said, the first order of business is training for the committee members. And that would be?
Good morning. My name is Jessica Escobar. I am Assistant General Counsel for this program, and I'm going to be doing your training this morning for open meetings and Administrative Procedures Act and the Public Information Act. So we'll be doing a quick run through and then get you guys going. So what is the Open Meetings Act? The Open Meetings Act is to ensure transparency and in open government. And the main purpose is to ensure that you've got, that meetings are open to the public. And this is a mandatory statute to, that is liberally construed in favor of transparency and open government for the public. So there are a few things that you need for the Open Meetings Act. One of those is quorum. Quorum is a majority of the members, and for this board, you've got 9 members, so you need 5 at least to have a quorum. So a quorum is when you have a group of those members that are meeting together, and you have to have at least that quorum in order to take action. So if we don't have a quorum, then you can still meet, but you can't take any actions. So that quorum has to meet together to have discussions. And if you are getting together and you have your discussions, then you now have a meeting. So when you have that quorum of members that are having a discussion together or with a member of the public or your regulated industry, you now have a meeting. And one of the key points that you have from the Open Meetings Act is that we need notice. This is very important to the public so that they know what is happening. So what we have here at TDLR is we have an agenda, and so this is posted here on our website and through the Secretary of State, and this agenda provides the public notice of the date, the time, and the subject of your meeting. This allows them to decide, okay, is there a topic on that agenda that is important to me? Do I need to come to this meeting? Do I plan to comment? And without that notice, people will have no idea what's coming up. You cannot engage in a topic that is not on the agenda. So what happens when you're together and you're in an informal setting that is not a meeting? So you're at an association, a conference. Can you still get together and talk? This often happens when or you may be at a party. Yes, you can still get together, but you don't want to start gathering and talking about board business, because now you're having a quorum and you're engaging in discussions. So you need to be cautious if you're having those discussions so that you don't have a quorum, and you don't want to get into those substantive conversations because you will have a walking quorum. So what is that? That is when you have less than your quorum of 5 members and you start talking about official business, and this can be through a variety of things. This can be through emails. Phone calls. So for example, on a 5-member board, if you have just a couple of folks that start having a phone call or exchanging emails, you start talking about the rules or something coming up, and then those couple of folks email them out to other board members, you now have a violation of the Open Meetings Act because you now have a walking quorum. So you want to avoid that. So these walking quorums can be anything. They can be during conference calls, video conferences, you can just be talking in the hallway or even the bathroom, or it can be something that is as simple as an email, a text message, and now with technology, this comes up on social media very frequently. Something that is as innocent as a Facebook post can turn into a violation of the Open Meetings Act because you may post something on your Facebook page, you may have something that other members might engage in or members of the public, and your comments essentially can turn into a walking quorum. So if it's something that may become substantive, that affects your board, you may not want to post about it. So to avoid a walking quorum or even the appearance of a walking quorum, you should not be meeting in small groups to discuss board or committee business and then having further discussions about that business. You don't want to be sending out emails or text messages to the group. Even if you start sending it out separately, essentially what you're doing is circumventing the Open Meetings Act. And then again, be cautious what you're doing on social media because you could be engaging. It may have been an original post and everybody starts commenting and it turns into a walking quorum. So the importance of that agenda. You're limited to what is on the agenda. So you want to be thoughtful of what you're speaking on. So we work very hard to make sure that you stay on topic. And if there's something that comes up, we can put it on your next meeting agenda. And the public is given an opportunity to comment. And if they bring up something that is not on the agenda, you can certainly, you can hear it, but we can choose to, we will put it on the next agenda. You can ask a clarifying question, for example, but you cannot engage in discussion. So to avoid violating the Open Meetings Act, based on this insufficient notice, for example, you want to limit those discussions, as I just said, and then not respond to any of those questions that the members of the public might bring up. So what happens? It's more than just suggestions of the Open Meetings Act. There are actually civil remedies if you violate the Open Meetings Act. An interested person, this is often the media or somebody that is affected, for example, by rules, they can actually bring this to the court and say you violated the Open Meetings Act, and they can get any actions invalidated. So they can actually sue to undo the actions taken during a meeting that was held in violation. Or they may actually have criminal penalties. So if you have a walking quorum, for example, you as board members could have criminal penalties that include fines or jail. So you want to avoid that. So these are some resources. I know some of y'all just had open meetings training for other boards that you were on, but we do have a video that you can do through the Attorney General's office if you haven't done it. It's a pretty useful video. And then there's also some other resources that you have that were in your materials. So what's next? Administrative Procedures Act, and this is basically for rulemaking. So the Administrative Procedures Act ensures that all state agencies handle their rulemaking in the same way. And it ensures that they all follow one procedure. So rulemaking is not just new rules. It can also be the amendment or the repeal of rules. So for us, we're going to be going over rules this morning, and rules can come from a variety of sources. For us this morning, we're going to be talking about rules that are the result of legislative changes. It's also from our work group that we talked about, and they can be from discussions that come out of meetings, some suggestions from staff, from our 4-year rule review, or it can be from a petition from the public. So a member of the public, an interested person, can actually submit a petition to us and request the adoption of a rule. So an interested person can be a resident here, a business entity here in Texas, governmental subdivision, or just a public or private organization that isn't a state agency but here in Texas. And what they would do is submit a petition to us that includes their proposed language, and we would decide what to do next, whether they would be granted a hearing or where to go next. So how does this work? First, we have an idea what we want to do with the rules. And then we begin drafting and reviewing those rules. This is where we are. We're in this little blue box. We've drafted the rules. We've sent them out to you for consideration. We're going to talk about them this morning. From here, what the next step would be to file them with the Texas Register. From there, after they're filed with the Register, the public will have an opportunity to review them and decide what their thoughts are. How does this affect them? They will be able to submit their comments to us here at TDLR, and we will review them and prepare them for you all and recommend any changes that need to be made based on those comments. They may be substantive changes, or they may just be comments that are all in support of the rules. Once we get those comments, we'll bring them back to you for consideration. You may review them and decide this is not where we wanted to go, or great, let's go forward. So then we'll have our second meeting, and we'll bring them to you, and you can make your recommendation to the commission to say we propose to adopt the rules. From there, we'll take the rules to the commission. They can review all the comments, the recommendations, and recommend to adopt the rules. Once we do that, we will file the adoption with the Texas Register, and then from there, the rules become effective in 20 days from that filing. So the other thing I mentioned is the rule review process. This is done every 4 years for all of our programs. So what we'll do is we'll look at all the rules for that program. We file a notice of intent to review. This is done with the Texas Register, and this allows the public 30 days to comment. Again, they'll look at the rules and decide these rules need to be in place. These are some suggestions we have. The rules don't need to be here. We take all of those comments and recommendations. We present them to the commission. The commission will decide from there whether to re-adopt the rules. And then, of course, we'll bring them over to you all based on those suggestions and comments and say, what do you all think? What do we need to do next? So here are some notes on rulemaking and resources for y'all. Last but not least, Public Information Act. So the Public Information Act is the one that most people are familiar with. This allows the public to get information from a state agency or local government. So this allows them the opportunity to get any documents or resources, records from that governmental entity. And this, here at TDLR, we have a lot of public information requests. And this can range from orders or information regarding licensees. And last year we had over 5,000 public information requests. So it's a lot of document requests. So what is a public information request? It's a request for any documents or records that we maintain in our public official business, and we have to release those to the public. So this can include any electronic communication that is created, transmitted, received, or maintained on any device here at TDLR. This includes communications that y'all create, both on your iPads, on your personal devices, so you have to be thoughtful in sending out those emails to us as part of your board business. So again, like the Open Meetings Act, this is in favor of the public in having an open and transparent government. So when we get a request, the process is that our Open Records division will get that request and work quickly to respond because we have statutory deadlines and we have to respond within 10 business days. So if you think you may have gotten a request, somebody sends something to you and wants some information, please forward it over to me or maybe to Marcia, and we'll get it over to the right folks really quickly. With that said, we might send something to you. We might need some information from you all, maybe some emails or other information, so please help us to respond quickly as well. We cannot ask somebody why they want information, but we may be able to ask for clarifying information because they might have a massive request for information. It may not be exactly what they're looking for. So we may be able to ask for a clarification. But there are some exceptions to disclosure. There are certain things that we will not release, and those are date of birth, email, certain education documents, and then health information. The other thing that we may sometimes get requests for, especially that affects y'all for our advisory committees, are board minutes. We do keep most of them online, but sometimes we get requests for board member information. So you will have something that you all fill out that says, I wish not to disclose my information. We've got that on file. We will not release your information. So just kind of quick information just for y'all. So again, this is one, there's a training information online for the for the Texas Attorney General. So if you haven't seen that video, it's also very helpful. And then we've got the Public Information Handbook online and the statutes. So if you have any questions, please feel free to let us know. And that's our training for this morning.
All righty. Thank you, Jessica.
Sure.
Are we allowed to ask questions right now?
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
If we're restricted on our discussions
please.
pursuant to...
Recognize yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Brian Sargent. If we're restricted on talking about agenda items, what's the procedure for getting something on the agenda?
Okay. Mr. Sergeant, Mary Winston, TDLR. You're restricted from talking about agenda or these items in a quorum, which means how many?
For this board is 5.
For this board, it's 5. So if it's a couple of you, you're not restricted. However, if then that one person shares with another person shares with another person, then you can have a walking quorum that will end up being a quorum and a violation, which ultimately, I love the way Jessica was so sweet and she said like, and it could end in jail. And she just went right on. Some of our assistant general counsels like to say jail and they like to drag it out. But I think we get it either way. How you get something on the agenda? You send an email to advisory.boards@tdlr.texas.gov. We can then, if something else needs to be vetted out to an individual member, we can do that. If there's a question to be asked, we'll send it out. You can even tell us, hey, wanted to talk to the chair about this, but concerned about open meetings or whatever, or just say, hey, guys, can you do this? And we can put forth, you need an intermediary to where you're not caught up making a walking quorum, which is ultimately against the law.
Why can't we have discussion about agenda items in this meeting so
You
that we're all
can.
here?
And you can. And
That's
so
what
when
I'm
we get
talking
to,
about.
oh, well, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. The H is recommendations for agenda items for the next committee meeting.
Okay.
And that's on every agenda for every meeting that we have. And that is what you do. Because it's there, I kind of went past there. And that is because we take suggestions for agenda items anytime you have those suggestions. If it's a situation relevant to the one that Jessica was speaking of and how not to violate open meetings, then we'll handle it here. But if you're here, this is an open meeting. And you can't violate an open meeting during an open meeting by doing what's on the agenda. So we do that. But outside of it, contact us and we'll make sure that nobody's going to jail here.
Thank you for that.
I'm not sure we have a procedure for following up to make sure that agenda items are carried forward to the next meeting.
If we don't follow up, we try to do so internally, but all you have to do is ask. We take notes. Every division that does a presentation and a question is asked. It's the onus is on them to follow up. We try to kind of do a double check on this end of the podium, but if we miss it, let us know and we'll get it back on there. Because we really do it internally, but we got a whole lot going on, no excuse. But if we miss something, we want to make sure we don't. So just visit with us.
Yeah, I think we're missing something on this agenda is why I asked, but when we get to that point, I'll bring it up.
And that's fine. And if we miss it, and if it's not here, and if we get items for next agenda, then we'll discuss it there. And if you want to hit us up with an email or phone call before whatever the next scheduled meeting is, please do so. I like emails because as a lawyer, I like that clean record. It's right there. So, and our response is right there, so we can make sure we get it covered for you.
Any other comments or questions about the training? Okay. Hearing none, I'd like to move on to the next item of business, which is approval of the minutes from the meeting on January 22nd of 2019. Give you everybody a few minutes to go over those minutes and ask if there are any comments or amendments to the minutes. should be down towards the, okay, it's the second item on the computer.
What I was looking for, Brian Sargent,
Oh, that's June 18th of 19.
I thought there was a meeting on the 22nd as well.
It is, it's right here.
Oh, yeah.
It's page 10 in your,
Yes.
So, that raises an interesting question. Do we have two sets of minutes to amend or approve?
I don't think so. I don't see
No,
it.
it's just
Okay.
the-
Because I'm looking at one that says, oh, excuse me. Helps if I read. Yeah.
And Mary Winston, TDLR, and I'm just saying this for anyone watching or listening.
There we are.
Okay, on the iPads, your stuff, the committee stuff, looks a little different than everybody else's. Like the page numbers, it's just the technology difference from iPad to whatever we have. So, if you have a question, we can always pause and get to it, because ours is gonna look different. We don't have iPads. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Brian Sargent comment. I was looking for an update on the technical memorandum process to be on the agenda for this meeting. And I'm not sure I found it on the agenda.
Okay, it is duly noted, and I'm getting responses. I hear something about rules mumbling. So we are aware of it, and we will definitely, there is a reason for it, and we're going to discuss that later.
There's a reason for not having on the agenda.
Apparently so. That's what I'm being told. But we can clear that up. And if we can move forward with the different reports, if you want to take a break, Mr. Chair, at a certain point, at your leisure, so we can kind of discuss with a board member, with a committee member, with Mr. Sargent, with our RPM staff, because if he wants something cleared up, to get it on the next agenda item, or to get it worded to where we can then discuss our, whatever it is. Because
Okay.
it would be, as stated, new business, because he's correct, it's not on the agenda.
Ron Menard again. In addressing Brian Sargent's comment, there is an item on the agenda here that talks about report and possible action on the technical memoranda process. So he did raise that. And
It
if
is,
we can
and-
get this on the next agenda, I would appreciate it.
That would be fantastic. Staff wants to speak to whatever subtle nuance or whatever. I'm not familiar with why it's not on here, but apparently there's a reason, and we will get it on, even if we need to reword it, or if some rules are coming out about it that we haven't yet discussed. But at this point, if it appears that those minutes are correct, and it appears they are, then we can approve them. And if you want, even at this point, we can take a little break and cover that if you want.
Okay. Brian, what's your feeling on this?
We need to have a break to discuss it?
No, Mr. Menard, I think what will happen is that during the RPM report, they'll be able to give you an update as
Yeah,
to
that's what I
that
was
particular agenda item, and they'll be able to provide you as to where we're at on that. I believe it has something to do with rules, but they'll bring you up to date on it at that point in time.
Yeah, and we can do it there because that's not changing the agenda. And that would be the only reason we'd have to take a break, is if that specific thing was going to be brought out in this meeting. It's just rules in the law that don't have anything to do with the technical aspect of this board, but the legal ramifications of putting on a public meeting.
Yeah,
So, RPM's given a nod that they can discuss it at that time during their report, and we can address it because it can come under public outreach, education, projects, things like that. Okay.
Okay. For clarification, what did we decide here?
It'll be brought up during the RPM staff report.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alrighty. There any other comments or clarifications on the meeting minutes?
Mr. Chair.
Okay. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes from the January 22nd meeting, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Hearing none. Oh, excuse me. Pardon me, I haven't done this in a while. I'd like to propose a motion to approve the summary of the minutes from the January 22nd meeting. Do I have a second? Okay, thank you very much. Have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, that takes care of that item. All righty, moving on to the next topic. We have, here we go. At this point, we are open the floor for public comments. Do we have anybody who is requested to speak to the board at this meeting? And seeing none, that takes us to staff reports.
Good morning, Chairman Menard and board members. I'm Chloe Whalen, Licensing Manager for the Registered Accessibility Specialist. The report that you have before you, for this fiscal year so far for 2020, we've we have renewed 64 licenses, done new licenses of 7, and the total population is 548. Another reminder that I just wanted to reach out to those that are listening and are here, that to get your renewals in timely, since we have a new program, and tabs will not allow you to do anything in that program when your license is showing expired. So we appreciate you doing what you're doing now, but just a reminder, just to try to get those in timely to us.
All
And
right.
that concludes my report.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
That was nice. All righty.
Yes, ma'am.
And-
Question, Kathy Riley. The renewal process, is it in tabs?
For a registered accessibility,
Yeah.
no, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Just wondering. Is it going to be electronic soon?
That is on the list of projects for them to work on getting the renewal online. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments from the board? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Gosh, I miss paper. I was trying to do that. Technology, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning, advisory board members. My name is Dawn Robinson. I'm from customer service. Here for your staff reports today. In front of you, you have your customer service contacts, architectural barriers, customer service contacts of fiscal year 2019 at the top in fiscal year 2020. To date, in September and October, we had a total of 11 emails for September and October. And as far as calls, we had 223 calls in September and 303 calls in October. Since our last meeting, we've had several changes. Our first change is we have moved from the EOT Thompson building from downtown. Customer service has moved here to the North Campus on the second floor. If you'd like to come by and visit and see our new dwellings, it'd be great. We're glad to have you. We've also had a few organizational changes. We've hired 2 managers in September, and we've hired at least 4 new CSRs. And that's our staff reports. If you have any questions, I'm here to help you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question, Rob Roy Parnell. So when we see the customer service contact, what does that entail in terms of the quantity that we see here in terms of calls, emails? Is this inquiries with technical questions, or is this just questions in general about the architectural barriers program?
Both. Some are technical questions like how to get into tabs. As the licensing manager before, we've had several calls about why we can't get into tabs, and because their RAS license had not been renewed. General questions: who can submit an AB project? Just pretty much general. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for the reply.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair, Advisory Board members. My name is Rebecca Adamas. I am the Education and Examination Education Liaison, and I will be delivering our report today. Just have a few things for you. As you're very well aware, TLR is growing by leaps and bounds, and so is our division. We've expanded, and we've got a couple of new teams that we've created within our division, and with that, we've got 2 managers that are now splitting duties and assisting Mr. Pizarro with the day-to-day operation of the Education and Examination Division. We have Angela Schmidt, who is taking care of our accreditation and certification section, and Mr. Michael Strawn, who is taking care of the outreach, audits, and policy section. And we will be hiring some more folks in the future. We'll look for team leads as well to expand our team. We're just growing so fast, and we need the help to make sure that we're taking care of everyone as best we can. As you see here on our statistics, we don't have much action as far as the administration of the examination. However, we did have some maintenance done on the examination in July this summer. We met with our subject matter experts just to do some maintenance on it to make sure that all items were performing properly, deleting items that maybe weren't relevant anymore due to any type of statutory changes, augmenting the item pool, just to make sure that the status of the examination stays relevant and that we're doing the proper assessment. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Ladies and gentlemen, any questions?
No?
Thank you
so
very much.
Hello, my name is Charlotte Melder. I am currently acting as, but am the previous manager of, the Business and Consumer Safety section over the AB division. I have been promoted as of December 1 to the director of the Regulatory Program Management Division, which I'm extremely excited about.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I am taking over for David Gonzalez, who was promoted to deputy executive director. He is now one of 3.
Congratulations to you too,
Yes.
David.
So, that is the organizational change that is on the agenda. I'm going to skip down real quick to the projects. As the director and as the manager over the AB, I made the decision not to put the tech memo procedure on the agenda because the rules change the procedure. And until those rules, and you'll understand when we get to that section of the agenda, until those rules are approved and passed, talking about the procedure is kind of not really timely because the procedure is going to change. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of foreshadowing, but when we get to that agenda item, you'll see what I'm talking about. And I can come back up and answer questions at that point if you need me to.
Brian? Good with that?
Okay.
Brian Sargent.
I'm going to turn it over to Marcia.
Okay, Marcia Godo, team lead for architectural barriers. We have been very busy since our last meeting. Of course, tabs went live, but we've had several trainings to registered accessibility specialists about tabs. We've done a couple of those, one at the APA and a couple here in-house. We had Norman and Jamie going and doing several academies, again, in-house and at the Building Professionals Institute. Hold on. Norman, help me. BPI, yes. Building Professionals Institute. It's there in your report, sorry. So they did several of those, and we've done outreach classes as well to try and increase the number of registered accessibility specialist licensees and try and get our name out there. The next part is our projects. Again, tabs went live in December, and then all our, what we call legacy projects from the old system, HP 3000, which is now gone, went over into tabs in June. Because of this, we've had an increase in emails. As you can see, we went from about an average of 55 emails a day coming through Tech Info to up to 80 now since December and the June conversion. We do feel it's working. We are getting several of those emails being contacts from owners regarding updating inspection or completion dates, letting us know what their process is, and getting all that information up to date and current in all the old projects as well as the new projects. So it is working for us. You could see we keep a steady flow on the plan reviews and inspections and variances and appeals. Do you have any questions about any of that statistics or the TABS program?
Marcia?
Yes, sir.
Rob Roy Parnell, just want to talk about, in a previous, some point along the way with either rules or policies and procedures, we were presented and we adopted those policies and procedures based on the rules, based on rolling out tabs, which I think is a really great positive step in the right direction. The additional refinement and enhancements, this, I'll call out one in particular, the search engine, is extremely beneficial and helpful for those that practice in the registered accessibility specialist world. And so I applaud you for that. I would like for us to probably have some work group or suggestion of a work group, or just that this group can help y'all in processes of aligning in terms of what we hear and feedback that we hear from the community and the public, and maybe another RAS or two or whatever the case may be, so that we can continue that alignment in the way you're doing it, but offer that assistance and suggest that we work as what we thought this would be as to what it is. And I know you are working on a lot of stuff, and I just a suggestion to Acting Chairman Menard and to you, Charlotte, that as the advisory board members and this process of policies and procedures and alignment on how this is working, as opposed to maybe some tweaking that might be necessary in those, that we stand and would initiate and put myself forward as a person that would dedicate some time for that.
Thank you very much for that. Again, this is Charlotte Melder. I wanted to just point out that an email with a suggestion might be your fastest route. We do have a list, a several-page list of tweaks that we're trying to get through. We have received several programs that require a lot of IT's time, so we are on a several-month delay of just the things that we've already suggested, and that is just the normal course of business. But if you want to be on that list, send us an email. We can absolutely do the work group thing, come in, have discussions, but all of this is IT-based, so the timing of it is just going to be whatever we can get. Just wanted to throw that out there.
And certainly can appreciate first in, first out, what's on fire and what's smoldering.
Yes.
So those processes are certainly understood. I just want to, as a practice of what this group does on behalf and support of you guys, that we know that there's a daunting task involved, and I think that whether it's a participatory process of people being in the place of being a RAS, or just being in the industry and hearing maybe some enhancements or support that we can give you, we just offer that. The work groups have been in place, and want to just have that as consideration to help in that process, but also understanding that it is based on when you can get in line based on the needs and where it affects the impact. But overall, I think this automation process is working, and it's finally a step in the right direction. So I'll give you a lot of credit for where you are.
Thank you.
Hard work. Good job.
Yes.
All five of you.
Any other comments from the board? Thank you very much for your time. Okay.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Robert Reyes. I'm an enforcement prosecutor. I'm taking over presenting the cases and the statistics from Robin Glassner, who was the last enforcement prosecutor to present before the committee in January of 2019. Some case highlights for y'all. On January 14th, 2019, a default order for the penalty amount of $2,000 was issued against Starbucks Coffee Company by the executive director. The respondent registered a project with the department on September 1, 2014, and in that project registration stated that they were going to have a completion date on or about July 30th, 2017. As of October 1st, 2018, an inspection report had not been filed for the project. A default order was entered January 14th, 2019, and by the executive director. In March 6th of 2019, the respondent filed a motion for rehearing. However, that was denied by operation of law, as they only had 25 days to file it. They filed it well after that 25 days had ended. The respondent did pay the penalty in full on April 30th, 2019. The second case is in reference to Huxley T.C. Smith, who was a registered accessibility specialist. On March 4th, 2019, an agreed order was entered between him and the department, assessing an administrative penalty of $2,250, as well as 8 hours of class instruction for performing a Texas Accessibility Standards inspection in a negligent or incompetent manner. Mr. Smith inspected a facility on or about March 2nd, 2019, and found and identified only one violation. A subsequent inspection conducted by two different RASs employed by the Texas Department of Health and Human Services found over 10 violations, including entries that were inaccessible according to the 2012 standards, as well as violations in bathrooms. Mr. Smith remitted payment in full on January 28, 2019. Third case is in reference to JWK Holdings Incorporated. On May 20th, 2019, an agreed order was entered between the department and JWK Holdings, Inc. The administrative penalty of $1,500 was agreed, where respondent was found in violation for failure to schedule an inspection with a registered accessibility specialist before the first anniversary of the date of completion of the project. The respondent registered the project on February 12, 2016, and stated it was to have a completion of August 2016. In the notice of alleged violation, which was dated April 5, 2019, no inspection had taken place. Full payment was received by the department on April 22nd of 2019. On July 1st, 2019, an agreed order was entered against the Point Shopping Center, LP. An administrative penalty of $1,500 was agreed between the department and the respondent for the respondent's failure to schedule an inspection with a registered accessibility specialist before the first anniversary of the completion of the construction project. The project was registered November 18th, 2014, and stated that it was to be completed in or about May of 2015. As of the notice of alleged violation dated May 22nd, 2019, the inspection had not taken place. Full payment of the penalty was received by the department on June 17th, 2019. Our fifth case is in reference to Legacy Woodbridge, LLC. On October 2nd of 2019, an agreed order was entered against Legacy Woodbridge in the amount of $1,000 for their failure to schedule an inspection, again before the first anniversary of the completion of the construction project. The project was registered with the department on August 22nd of 2016, with a stated completion date in or about February of 2017. As of the notice of alleged violation in the case, which was August 16th, 2019, no inspection had taken place. The full payment of the penalty was received by the department on August 26, 2019. In regards to case statistics that we have for you, looking back to the whole of fiscal year 2018, there were 136 program cases opened in that time period, with 118 resolved during that time period. There were 41 final orders, and the penalties assessed were $61,750, of which 45,300 were collected. The next fiscal year, 2019, which began September 1, 2018, and ended August 31st, 2019, we had 204 cases opened in the program. 210 were resolved during that time period, with 81 final orders being signed. There were $105,500 in penalties assessed, of which $87,500 were collected. So far, in the last, for the 2 months stated through October of the fiscal year 2020, which is from September 1, 2019 to October 31st, 2019, there have been 64 cases opened and 46 cases have been resolved. So far, we have collected all of the penalties we have assessed, and that amount is $11,850. I'm available to all of you to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Members?
Robert Parnell. So you had in 19, you had 204 cases open, you had 210 resolved. Is that from pending previous years?
That's exactly correct, sir.
Okay.
We, the numbers are done exactly at the timestamp. So basically, when we have it open, it could have been open the previous fiscal year, closed with an order the next fiscal year. So that's why you see a little bit of a disconnect. But you're exactly right, sir.
All right. Thank you for answering.
Sure thing.
Ron Menard?
Yes, sir.
I'm seeing it looks like there's a bit of an uptick in the number of cases being opened. Any observations on that as to why?
Not really, sir. What I could imagine is that there are a lot more people that understand that there's elimination of architectural barriers program. There's a lot of outreach that has been done, as you've heard through RPM. I know Mr. Kaigi does a lot of work, and the word has spread out more, so I believe there's more knowledge about what is necessary for accessibility. So I believe people are actually more in tune and more familiar with what needs to happen. And so when people see a violation or people see something, they're reporting it.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All righty. Any other comments or questions from the board? Thank you very much
Thank you,
for your
sir.
time. Alrighty. Way up to the top. Okay. Let's see. Executive office. Right here, yeah. Personnel updates.
Good morning, Chairman Menard. Good morning,
morning,
Advisory
David.
Board members. So, yes, I'm here to give you the executive report. We'll start off with personnel updates. I know that y'all have noticed there's some faces that change, and if it's the same faces you see, they may be with different titles and different names. We have been experiencing a little bit of growth and a little bit of changes in how we do business here at TDLR. So I'll start off with, we had a Deputy Executive Director, Carla James, who you may remember, she wore some funky reading glasses, much more stylish than what I'm wearing. She retired, well-deserved retirement. She contributed her part to state government service and was very happy to be staying at home now and doing her part to watch novellas and soap operas and coupon cutting. But in our executive director's infinite wisdom, he decided that we've grown so much, instead of hiring just one replacement, he decided to hire 2 replacements. I am one of those replacements for Deputy Executive Director, so I have been promoted from my Division Director responsibilities to Deputy Executive Director, as well as...
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. 23 years. It only took me 23 years to make it here.
An overnight success.
An overnight success, yes. Also, Christina Kaiser, who is formerly our Enforcement Division Director, she's been promoted to Deputy Executive Director. And we've divided responsibilities. I've got responsibility for customer service, education examination, and ultimately licensing division. She's going to have responsibilities for enforcement, field operations, and for my former division RPM, which is Regulatory Program Management. So we've got some new responsibilities that we just took effect December 1st is when our titles took effect and our responsibilities. So a few changes there. We also have some promotions, and Charlotte made reference to it. She was previously my Building and Consumer Safety Manager. She was promoted to the RPM Division Director, which congratulations to her. And I'll get a round of applause on the microphone for that one. Very well deserved. Also, Mr. Ron Foster, one of our prosecuting attorneys, lead prosecuting attorneys, was promoted to become the Enforcement Division Director to replace Ms. Christina Kaiser. So lots of similar names that you may have seen or heard, but they're moving around. And I'll segue into the next agenda item, update from the 86th Legislature. The reason for a lot of these changes is because, as you know, during the legislative session, our agencies can be pretty popular. If there's programs that are existing or new programs, our agency is usually tagged for maybe it's a possibility for TDLR to take on some more responsibilities. So during the legislative session, we had House Bill 2945, motor fuels was transferred from the Texas Department of Agriculture. That is the one of the programs, one of a few programs that Ms. Charlotte was alluding to, is taking up quite a bit of IT time right now. We are in the throes of administering that program. That went into effect September 1st of this year as far as the responsibilities, but that was a pretty short timeline for the responsibilities we have, so we're still trying to get some of that IT work done, and there is some catch-up that needs to be done. So appreciate y'all doing y'all's job as advisory board members for architectural barriers. You know, we have all these other programs we got to worry about, but y'all's focus is supposed to be elimination of architectural barriers. So bringing up those items, making sure that we're sticking to the agendas that y'all have brought up items for is going to be important going forward, because y'all are competing with 37, 38 other programs for our attention, time, and resources. And we do the same. So I appreciate y'all doing that. The other bill that we got, or another bill that we have, is Senate Bill 616, which is the motorcycles program that came over from DPS. That doesn't go in effect until September 1st, 2020, and so we've just started making communications with some of the other entities, Texas A&M Extension Service and DPS, to see about that program coming over in September. We also have an omnibus bill, which is 2847, a very large bill touching many programs, but giving us some authorities, a little bit of details to maybe extend licensing terms, some fee authorities. If you wanted to look these things up, we actually have a lot of that information on our website. But these are the many bills that have required us to think about how we do business, think about doing it a little bit differently, and spreading the love and pain, if you will, the pain points that go along with it. Next on the agenda item is the sunset review process. So sunset review typically happens every 12 years, 7 years? 12 years. Every 12 years. And we were able to forego our regularly scheduled sunset review because we kept on growing and they gave us a bit of time. But no more extensions. We are under sunset review right now. For every program that was with us before September 1st of 2016, we are having it assessed by the Sunset Commission. It is your opportunity. It's the public opportunity. Everybody that's listening at home, you can go to our website or the Sunset Commission's website and give us y'all's feedback. Good and bad, things that we could do better. This is your opportunity, because what the Sunset Commission decides is whether or not this agency will continue in existence as is or with changes. They can they can decide also on whether or not any programs need to continue or have some changes or be dissolved. So it's an important time in an agency's history what happens in sunset doesn't just stay in sunset. It can actually end up as a bill in the next legislative session to have changes, legislative changes, or they can give us directions on how we should conduct our business if there's not a statutory or rule change required. Again, I would encourage you, if you haven't been to our webpage recently, it's on the very front page, top left-hand side. It gets top billing because this is an important time. I would compare it to our strategic planning, but it's much more comprehensive. This is not going to be necessarily a good and bad report, which is what we're looking for. What are we doing well and what can we do better? They're usually just looking for the exceptions report. And so we are going to be listening to what they have to say, listening to what the public has to say, and this is y'all's opportunity as advisory board members to participate as well. So whatever y'all want to share with us, you're welcome to go to our website to do that.
Thank you.
Communication, outreach, and statistics. So we have started the tradition of sharing how popular our web pages have been because y'all see how many phone calls and emails that we get. But apparently 85% of the visitors access our site from a desktop computer, 11% did so via a smartphone, and 4% from a tablet. I would expect actually the numbers to be higher for phones and tablets, but at least people are going to our website. Over the past 6 months, we had 230,464 views, which is an average of 1,253 per day. So people are going to our webpage. If there's things that we can do better on our webpage, that's not necessarily something that has to wait for sunset. Y'all can send those emails to see if there's things that we can move around or additional information that we can put on our website that would get it more top billing, more page views, but this is actually a pretty high volume for this page. The top reasons for visiting the site are the standards. Everybody goes online to see the standards. Architectural barriers administrative rules come second. Architectural barriers forms third. Registered accessibility specialist procedures fourth. And then the Texas Accessibility Academy registration. And I am proud to say and give kudos and props to our AB staff, Norman, as well, for continuing the tradition of our Accessibility Academy. When I started here, it had already been going on a couple of years, so over 25 years in existence, and the Academy is still full. Almost every single presentation we have for the Academy, it is full, and that's a big accomplishment. So thank you for y'all's work on the Academy and continuing that.
Thank you, Norman.
That's all I have to report unless there's some questions that you have of us, or if there's anything I'm forgetting. You know what, one more person that I need to introduce, and y'all met her earlier, Jessica Escobar. We were fortunate enough to steal her from Texas Department of Agriculture. In fact, she almost introduced herself as TDA. So that's a general counsel change. General counsel is so important to the job we do here, especially when it comes to rules and trying to get agenda items done properly so we get the business of the state and the public done. So Jessica's a new addition and a new face as well, so we're glad to have her.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have for the executive office.
All righty. I believe that takes us to changes from the last legislative session. Let me double check here.
Actually, it's agenda item G. This is David Gonzalez,
Yes.
agenda item G now.
Yep. Next topic is discussion and possible recommendations on the proposed amendments to the existing rules at 16 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 68, Section 68-100, and a new rule, 68-104.
All right, Jessica Escobar.
That's a lot of title.
It is a very long one. Jessica Escobar, Assistant General Counsel with TDLR.
Marcia Godo, Team Lead for AB.
All right, Chair and members, I am going to present to you the proposed amendments to Section 68.100 and new 68.104 of the Administrative Code. You should have those in your materials. And we will go through these section by section, so if you have any questions along the way, feel free to stop me. And following my presentation, the department would recommend or request that you recommend that these rules be proposed for public comment. And like we discussed earlier, following that time period, then we'll bring any comments back to you all for review and discussion. So we'll start with Section 68.100. 68.100. So the proposed amendments to 68.100 were requested by staff and include a grammatical change to correct the reference from Texas Commission of Licensing and Regulation to Texas Department of Licensing and Regulation. And this allows the department to publish those technical memoranda that we were discussing earlier and be more responsive to critical industry issues in a timely manner. So technical memoranda, of course, include the department positions, clarifications, and interpretations of tasks. And this change was suggested to ensure that we can issue these necessary memoranda and do this expeditiously, following, of course, consultation with the work group and with you all, our subject matter experts in this field. Do you have any questions regarding that one? Okay.
Any comments on that?
I have a question. So, Rob Roy Parnell, so there was some discussion previously about technical memorandum that had been issued prior to this rule change. Will that be recognized that all those technical memoranda that have been previously issued will be valid and can still maintain and be published as they have been done with this language?
Mary Winston, I'm TDLR. I'm looking at nods in the audience from our division. Yes, we operate in real time, and that will not invalidate anything previously, but we will be moving forward.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
All right. So section 68, Marcia? Mr. Sargent? No? Okay.
I'm
Section.
not sure I understood that, Brian Sargent. Not
Yes,
sure I
they will be
understood.
valid.
How would this 100 affect technical memorandum? All it is a word correction.
It is just a word correction, so that means that it would change it from having the commission, so instead of being essentially authored by the commission or issued, those memoranda being issued in the name of the commission, the department would be the one that would be the one issuing them.
Oh, the commission being the TDLR commission.
Right, TDLR
Oh, okay.
commission.
I
So
got you.
now TDLR, actual TDLR will be the one to issue those memoranda.
Department.
The
The
department.
department instead of the commission.
Yeah.
This is David Gonzalez, the department, along with the input from our advisory work group, instead of having to go before the commission.
That makes sense.
Right, instead of having to go through meetings. Sorry about that. Okay, so section 68.104 incorporates mandatory requirements in response to House Bill 3163, which was passed during the 86th legislative session. The proposed rule was developed with the input from workgroup members Michael McDonald and John Rickard. We will go through this one section by section. So we'll start with Section A, which adds a requirement that a paved parking space must include the international symbol of access in a contrasting color on the surface of the pavement. The words "no parking" must be painted on any access aisle that is adjacent to the parking space, and it must be in all capital letters. The rule also prescribes the requirements for the height and the width of those letters, but I won't go into those. A sign must also be included with the parking space that identifies the consequences for parking illegally, and there is some minimum requirements for that language, which is violators are subject to fine and towing. And the rule also includes some minimum requirements for that signage as far as the print on the sign for the language, and also how high the sign must be and how it must be posted. Section B of the rule provides that language can be added to a currently existing sign that meets the requirements of Task 502.6, and that this allows someone to use one sign in lieu of having two separate signs. And those are your new rules, new and amended rules. Changes, questions?
Board members, any comments or questions?
Mike Olson. So, at the top of it says a paved accessible parking space.
Right.
So I work in the building and planning side of it. So most municipalities, they don't define what is paved. Is it caliche? Is it asphalt?
Right.
Is it crusher fines? Is it concrete? That kind of leaves it very vague
Okay.
for a municipality to try to enforce that part of it because it's so vague. In my municipality, we consider it an all-weather surface, which is concrete or asphalt.
Right.
So we actually define it in there, but some of them don't have that. So how is that going to work on that?
Brian Sargent, for instance, in Dallas, it's a gravel pad underneath the park.
Okay.
Is allowed under the paving requirements.
So we don't define paved in the Texas Accessibility Standards either.
I think we need to get rid of the word paved.
Well, so the word paved came from statute. So this is something that we can look at. If we need to define paved, then we can add paved to that definition, if that's something that needs to be clarified.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
John Rickard. Yeah, I did note that the law specifically says if it's paved,
Mhm.
you have these requirements. In many codes, there have definitions, and then it says for anything not in this definition you refer to, and they'll specify a dictionary. Do we have that in our standards at all? Does it tell you
Yes.
what dictionary to go to?
Yes, it
So
does.
that would be where you would go for the term paved?
Well, so the issue that we're facing here is that we're adopting this into the administrative code, so we wouldn't be referring back to tasks. So where we would need to, just kind of like we're looking at the issue with access aisle or adjacent. So where we would need to put that definition would be actually in the rule. So we would need to define paved in the rule itself.
So John Rickard again, so the administrative standards don't refer you back for definitions somewhere else if a definition is not actually in the rules themselves?
So we would want so instead of going backwards from task to the rule, we would want the rule clearly defined so that somebody that's going to the actual administrative code rule has everything that they need there within the rule, so that they're not going back to essentially to a policy procedure in task. They need all of the guidance within that administrative code rule. So we don't want them going to a guide. Essentially, that's the rule is what's controlling the administrative code rule. So we would want to put that definition there in the rule as well. So there's no opportunity for ambiguity or discussion. And so we can specifically define it for this rule within that section.
This is
John Rickard.
This is David Gonzalez with TDLR. Just as a reminder, this is a proposed rule as a result of statutory changes. Mr. Ricard, you pointed out accurately the language came straight from statute, unpaved. So I think this is an opportunity for us not only to go to the public to get all the different versions of caliche, decomposed granite, all the things that we've experienced, to get that out on the public record, to get the public input, and then maybe bring it back to the work group for the rules review. I think we have a standing work group for rules if we need to. We do have a little bit of pressure to try to implement statutes relatively quickly. We don't want to miss out on these opportunities, but if there's opportunity for clarification, if there's things that could be confused, that's where the advisory board and the work groups that are associated could give us some help should we get a lot of feedback on these public comments when we propose this rule. That make sense?
John Rickard, so I'll say two things. Number one, this is great. I really like the way this is written. So we're nitpicking about the word paved. I guess my question is, just generally from a enforcement standpoint, do you see, as an attorney, the lack of a definition of paved being an issue? I mean, there's one side of this is we want to make sure it's clear for the ASJs, but the other side of it is if you had to enforce something and said, well, that's not really paved, do you see any issues with that?
Right.
Because if that's the case, then definitely a definition would be.
I would defer to Marcia as far as what they would be running into.
And to be honest, when you did the parking for the Texas Accessibility Standards, we didn't put paved in there for a reason. You know, if you intended to have parking there, we wanted to make sure you had accessible parking, which then in the end, to make it all stable, firm, slip resistant, they paved the accessible spaces with concrete or something.
So and so this is why in providing a definition, we can have it apply specifically for this rule only. So if we're saying paved, you can have it apply here, and so it's narrowly defined. So having it within this rule only doesn't pigeonhole you for the rest of tasks, if that makes any sense, because we're saying paved for purposes of this rule, and it wouldn't apply, for example, to the rest of the code, because it would not be a broad definition, for example, in the general definition section for all of tasks. I'm sorry, for all of the administrative code. if that makes any sense.
David Gonzalez with TDR, and as y'all recall, the Texas Accessibility Standards are the same as the federal standards, which do not define paved. Stable, firm, and slip resistance is the enforceable standard, which could still be a challenge for our enforcement division on occasion, but we got pretty good prosecuting attorneys. I think for the most part, we know what it is when we see it, and we have pretty good compliance results by pursuing it. But I know the challenge that the local municipalities and the registered accessibility specialists have when someone doesn't make it asphalt or concrete where it's easily identified. It is a challenge. So if there's an opportunity to do it for this rule, which is a new statutory requirement above and beyond the task standards, we could consider it. I wouldn't want to touch the existing standards, though, and cause any confusion there.
Brian Sargent, you can have a firm, stable, accessible path made out of decompressed granite. Now, that might not be easy to maintain, but that's not our job to tell the customer that. For instance, at health clubs and stuff, there's paths and things. And since I think I got on this board because I invented the world's largest curb ramp, I would be, you remember that, Dan?
I do recall that, sir.
I'd be there are going to be people who will, I see a couple of things on here that people will. One of the things is that it's, what I tell folks is is as much about what it says as what it doesn't say. So I think we have to rethink the word pay.
Okay, one of the other things that I may just also, Jessica Escobar, one of the other things I do want to share is, one, putting legislation into effect, we also have to consider legislative intent. And so you may want to consider that as well. And so going back to, again, one of the issues that we worked with was, access aisle and adjacent. So legislative intent is often different times than what subject matter expert in industry may use. It may differ. So I'm going to leave you with that. Obviously, we will take, we can take in comments and do with that what we will, but I will leave that thought with you as you look at this.
Oh, this is Brian Sargent again. So where did this come from?
So this is a bill. This came from a bill that was passed this session. And so
House Bill 3163 specifically.
Mm-hmm.
Ron Menard, the word paved seems to be creating some confusion.
Mm-hmm.
It inevitably refers back to the appropriate material standards that are in TAS, and possibly using a reference to that section of TAS in lieu of the word paved might be a solution to this.
Well, and there's also another problem, and that is the word painted.
Right.
Mike Olson, that's the other key, because you're in Texas, you put base down, you put gravel down, you put granite down. You're going to drive this big truck or car, and you're going to turn the wheels. It rains. Now that marking's gone. Now you're in violation, but yet we said you've got to have it, but I'm in violation, but it was there when I built the building and when I got it inspected, but now it's gone. So am I in violation, or am I still compliant?
Wow, good point.
I mean,
This goes back to legislative
You've got to
intent.
look at,
Well, there's actually another reason why I mentioned that. They don't always paint stripes or no parking or these symbols. They're plastic that are heated up, and it's fused with the pavement.
Yep.
And that's very permanent, so it doesn't wear out as much. It's a lot more expensive. This is actually a pretty expensive House bill for a building owner. This represents a couple $1,000s for each accessible parking space. Now, I'm assuming that this would only be enforced when an alteration occurs.
Yes, sir. Marcia Godo. So we're a construction law. So when you do construction or you new construction, it would trigger. Alterations that affect primary function areas would also trigger compliance with this new rule.
Or resurfacing.
Or resurfacing of a parking lot.
I was
would also
unaware
trigger it.
that there was any kind of paint required for the adjacent aisle. So now we're requiring just a no parking, but I'm pretty sure we don't have.
Well, we
striped
had marked,
paint.
no, it had
There was a
marking, it said to be marked. There is, marking is in the
As to
current-
prohibit someone from parking in that space.
Yes, marking to prohibit, here, but yes.
This is David Gonzalez, and that was specific from the actual statute. So the statutory language, the no parking was specifically listed in statute. If I'm not mistaken, Marcia, correct me if I'm wrong. And so these are new additional requirements proposed by legislation. Again, y'all's points are well taken. That's why we're putting a rule out there based on input that we received from the contributors to the, I guess, research that were being done when this bill was being passed. And we're looking for y'all's feedback on this and from the public as well. So when we bring it back to you guys for final approval, it may need a word or two tweaked.
John Rickard, so just a couple of things. Number one, David pointed out earlier that this is in the rules but not in tasks. And the issue with that I have is that people aren't going to see it. If you're looking for tasks, you're not going to find this requirement. And so I guess my request is that you consider revising tasks to add this in there. Now, there's another aspect of this, Jessica, that you just mentioned too, which is that, or Marcia, I guess, talked about, which you talked about this being affected by for areas that contain an alteration of area of primary function. That's in tasks. So I guess my question is, how do you get from task to this? How do we know this is not just for new construction or repaving? How do we know that an alteration affects this if the alteration language is in task, but this isn't in tasks?
So and Marcia Goda, you can correct me, Jess, if I'm wrong, but the rules specify that you must comply with the rules as well as tasks when you have a construction project that's triggered, that's subject to 50,000.
Right,
So
because you're going to go back to rules for exemptions, you're going to go back for rules for certain issues with city right-of-way issues that we've discussed, so there is reference to the rule. And, but I think you have to align legislatively as a 28-and-a-half-year now retired public official. We've got to align with that language. I think, could we consider these, here's the problem that happens. Once this gets to a rule, and then it gets enforceable on the streets, whether it's a municipality or a RAS, we want to be definitive and not nebulous in our language that we adopt as a technical memorandum. So could it be that you take these things that are very valid in consideration of what's happening, but you have to be in alignment with the legislative language. You have to do, you know, that's just a no-go world, because that's what the law says. You are told to do it in the law. So I'm just wondering for consideration with the advisory group to let the process move forward, but I think there needs to be a collective agreement by the advisory board to make sure that the language we put in a technical memorandum gives the clarity, which is what we do with the technical memorandum, is it's just a position of clarification. So if we could consider that as a group, kudos to our group so far to take it where we are, but I think we need to align, but then we need to clarify so that whether you're in the industry, your authority having jurisdiction to hold these issues, that we have some further discussion here. Because I think you have a problem, and just a personal opinion that our personal experience is that when you go out into the real parts of the community and they have a wedding venue, let's say, and they have a decomposed granite and it's highly compacted and it's firm slip resistant and meets everything that is to meet with 302 and 303 of the Texas Accessibility Standards. When I walk away, that striping is gone. How do you stripe it? And so, if this is a position, this is a technical, I guess at the end of the day, what I'm hearing is how do you take the law, place it into the standards, which we do by technical memorandum, but how is it that we do this in a way that meets a maintenance, longevity, perpetuity issue, is what I'm hearing.
Mike McDonald. there are more issues, it seems to me, than just the pavement, what the pavement is made out of. And may I put a couple of items into this conversation? One, it's a chance to reach a bilingual conversation about what the sign says. I mean, there needs to be more information on that sign other than a $200 fine. Another thing, when is it going to take place? We need to be talking when this is going into effect. Is it going to affect projects that are in here now? Or is it going to be projects that are 6, 8, 10 months away? What I see now in looking at pavement all over town, I see, in one particular case, I see instead of stripes, I see little stencil fish on the pavement. There are lots of violations of this, not necessarily violations, but just negligence and people paying no attention at all. What's curious to me about the legislature is that they took a prescriptive version of this and not a, they didn't set out to change the law. They just dealt with little technical items of placing the new pavement on the ground. So we don't have to do, this is not a great controversial subject. We just have to tweak our rules just a little bit and maybe enforce them. So I would suggest in our next conversation that we talk about the sign, what's going to be on the sign. We talk about how, and the gentleman down here made a good point, it's going to add some cost to the pavement because what you could once do with a 4-inch roller and a chalk line is going to have to be done with a stencil, probably a high-volume, low-pressure spray rig, and that's going to bring in an altogether different class of installer on the pavement. So when I say that, you say, well, why is that? Well, because that 2-inch stripe has to be laid out. Now, if you put down a stencil and you take a spray can and you spray that on, and then you go in there and roll a stripe on it, then you can do it that way. But probably, by the time you do the little man in the middle of the parking spot, that can be done with a 4-inch roller, or it can be done with a high-volume, low-pressure paint rig. So you got two options now, one of which cannot be done with a roller. I suggest that the 2-inch no parking is not the same category of effort that we once had. That's a hard little piece of painting to get done, and that should be considered in whenever you come to vote. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I've got another question. Is there a state law pursuant to parking in a handicap parking space that overrides 90% of these parking spaces are going to be on private property? If there's no overriding fine, then there's no need. You see what I'm saying? Is there a state statute that dictates that there's a fine regardless of the location of the parking space if someone parks illegally or, excuse me,
This is
accidentally?
David Gonzalo, TDLR. Mr. Sergeant, I don't believe there is. I believe that's why the drafter of this legislation moved forward, because their main priority was to address parking, and it's not addressed consistently from municipality to municipality and at the state level in regards to accessibility-related issues specifically. So y'all have some options here to consider. Obviously, we put forth some language for y'all to consider. Y'all can propose to move forward with the language as is, and we get all the public comments. Y'all could propose to make amendments on the language with whatever you want to, and we put that forward and get the feedback based on what y'all want to put forward with any tweaks or changes. But I would encourage you, between now and the time we get those comments back, House Bill 3163 specifically has the no parking. It specifically has paved. So we are going to be held to the language and statute as far as how far we can take what we're proposing. The technical memorandum may be an appropriate device to make some clarifications. We do want consistency in the administration at the local level, at the state level. We want the RASs all doing it the same way. So I definitely appreciate the conversation, discussion, and the concerns, because we will have to deal with those as well when it comes to administering them, teaching it in an academy, and also doing enforcement at the end of the day. So y'all's insight, y'all's feedback is important on this.
And Brian Sargent, one of the philosophies of the TDLR, elimination of architectural barrier, and I've been involved, I think, 16 years now.
At least.
Yeah, well, I met you in '96, so I've known you your entire career.
23 years, yes, sir.
Is to eliminate costs that could be better spent on other things. These things are going to get covered up with cars most of the time. And they wear out and they're expensive. Base price for a universal sign is $500. That's just for one. It's more than one color. And I'm having a hard time understanding how we have to work really hard to align with all the other the Texas state laws, and then as Texas legislator makes something up that doesn't necessarily fit into what we've been working on for so many years. I don't have a problem with the idea of making it, at least the aisles are a bigger problem than the parking spaces are. But all this signage about fines and stuff like this is, you won't even be able to see all this stuff.
David, Robert Parnell, is it possible that you could pull up the actual bill and allow the advisory members to hear the actual language as it was passed into law?
It's the language is quite extensive.
Can we just get the excerpt, or?
I believe
counsel
we could
give
pull
that
it
to
up
us?
on the smart board and have it in front of y'all if y'all'd like to.
If that might be beneficial.
And actually, just speaking with Mary Winston, Jessica was at the hearing, so she has firsthand knowledge. And if it's possible, Mr. Chairman, can we take a 5-minute break while she sets up everything?
Yes, I'd like to take a 5-minute break.
Okay,
Let's do
thank
that.
you.
right here at number 1.
Is paid.
Sir.
Is
As long as it's.
It is paid.
Pavement?
Thank you. Thank you.
you'd like to wait for the handouts, we can do
Okay.
that.
Right?
So if,
So are we ready to start this back
We're-
up again?
we're ready if you're ready.
We,
Ready?
let's do this.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay. This meeting is back in order. We are continuing our discussion on the accessible parking requirements based on the new State House bill.
So as background, funny enough, I actually attended the hearing on this bill. And so just so you know, so what the impetus for this bill and the people attending this bill, their arguments and their concerns were that they could not get parking close to the building. There were parkings, and they were marked as accessible parkings. However, when they would get there, people were parked next to them, and they couldn't get in and out, for example, with vans or other issues. That was the motivation for this bill. And so having those access aisles marked, that was why these were added, would be so that people could park actually near a building and not have to park really far away, which is what all these people were saying. I'm having to park far away, I'm having to park and I'm having to pay valet because I can't get close to a building. We need something done. So that was the motivation for the bill. How the signs, how everything else came up, I cannot tell you, but that was the motivation, was painting the access aisles, the adjacent access aisles, and marking those. So that's what was said, and that was the motivation at the hearing. So hopefully that gives you a little bit maybe of clarification, going to paved, going to why things are being painted. So hopefully that helps in your discussions and in your review. We kept the rule very concise to the legislation. And if you see the legislation, literally 2 points. One is you've got to paint it, and you have to have a sign. That's it.
Right. Ron Menard. One of the very first things I noticed in the bill itself is it says specifically if the parking space is paved. So there was, by the very wording of this, parking on caliche and other less permanent surfaces is not a part of this bill.
Right.
Is everyone in agreement on that point?
When you look at the definition of paved in the Webster's dictionary, it says stone.
Mike Olson, yeah, the definition is concrete, asphalt, stone, or brick. Granite, decomposed granite, is stone. Caliche is stone. It's all a form of stone. That's why, and I don't think it's the paved part that's really, and when I brought mine up, wasn't it. The part that was getting to me is I was showing paved, and then it was saying painted. Now you have a surface that is not gonna be maintained.
Right.
Once it is painted.
And won't readily adhere paint
Therefore-
over the long term.
Therefore, you're really,
Next guy's in trouble.
yeah.
So the only thing I will leave with you again is legislative intent might be different in looking at a dictionary, or they may not use industry terms. So I will leave that with you, but of course, any changes that we make, we can certainly take input, as David's saying, we can certainly take input and see what the public has to say. However, if we are looking to make significant changes, if paved is something that you're really feeling passionate about changing now, and you feel like we need to make that change sooner than later, that's something that we may want to change now, because if that's something that we're changing after the fact, after we take public comments, that may be a substantive change, and we may have to go back out for proposal and public comment again. So that's something to think about as we're looking at these rules at this moment.
Council, thank you.
Yes.
Can I just simply say that intent is very important here?
Yes.
And the testimony, this was, with all due respect to the legislative process, it's not always completely accurate. develop sometimes some nebulous intent or trying to address the problem but not doing it from a technical manner. We have used things called equivalent facilitation in the process, previous process. What I'm recommending is that we provide, should a surface cannot be painted, that there be the providing a vertical sign with the same information that's centered on the access aisle, that vertically provides notification that that is a no parking area. The reason why I say vertical sign, because if you have weather and it snows, now it doesn't happen a lot in Texas or in this part of the world, but those surfaces get covered up, and that doesn't address the problem either. So the vertical signage depicting and providing the information as it's being provided here and centering it and defining the aisle, because the aisle can either be 5 foot or it can be 8 foot or it can be 11 foot depending on the designation of the parking space. So with that, I turn it to my advisory board members here, but I think we leave this here but give an alternative to address an equivalent facilitation to as in the rule, or either do it in the rule or do it by technical memorandum. But I think it needs to be on the street in the rulemaking public process so that we give them, so we do not defer this any further and allow for the intent to be enforced. And the question came up about enforcement. I think that we fall back into commencement date, that's when this starts. That's the other question that came up today, which is commencement date, and it is in effect when we follow the same definition that we've had in the past about issuance date, I believe is the correct term, is it not, Marcia?
Yes.
My suggestion.
Mike McDonald, we find some parking spots that are at an angle. And that brings the striped area to a point, or you have to take this no parking symbol and put it outside of the striped area on the concrete at the end of the striped area, the blocked off area. So I'm suggesting to you that it depends on if you're straight in parking or you're diagonal parking, but something's got to happen if you're going to contain it within the striped area. The no parking sign going to look kind of funny if it's at an angle. I saw some yesterday that were painted onto the concrete, did not even touch the parking space as striped. And it said no parking.
This is Brian Sargent. Is it possible that permanently marked is the intent of the word painting? And that we could actually write our rules pursuant to the permanently marked, and then that solves all the gravel problems.
This is David Gonzalez with TDLR. So we cannot legislate by rule. Rules are intended, and correct me if I'm wrong, Counselor, are intended to clarify statutory language. It cannot go beyond the statutory authority. So when we're reading, again, the reason the rules are before you with the language we have, it said paved. It does say if provided. So we have that there, and it's still there with the rule that we proposed. It says painted in statute. So although I appreciate the creativity with the signage and the different ways to do these things, we cannot go beyond what the statutory direction is. We can provide clarification, and that's limited with some of the stuff that we'd have to do. But I don't want to discourage the input, and that's why we actually worked hard in-house so that we could put something out before you guys. We are expecting to get public comment. I expect it's going to address everything that's already in the statute, which there was a time to address statute that would have been during the legislative session. And so now we're kind of confined to this is the language and the options we may have available. Again, open to any creativity that would keep us within the language specific to statute, but we are challenged by this.
This is Ron Menard. As you mentioned, this is open for public comment.
Right.
For the benefit of those in the audience, both here and listening online, what is the address for addressing public comment?
That will be published with the rules. I can't give that to you right now. And the rules will be also on our website, but we will get that to you.
When it's published in the Texas Register, that's when we get the information that we would have sent out. But it's specific to go to the Texas Register, though.
Yes, so we'll have that online, and I'll get that to you shortly.
So
We'll get you that address.
So just clarify, this, John Berger, it's not actually out for public comment?
It is not yet. So
Yeah.
this is why we're coming to you to discuss this first. We have not sent it to the public, to the Texas Register, and it is not out for public comments. So we wanted to discuss it with you all before we sent it out for publication. And then at that time, after it goes out for publication, that's when we would start accepting public comments, not until that time period.
John Rickard, one follow-up. I like the language that's proposed. I think it's really well thought out, and it follows the statute very well, and the comments that have been made are great comments, and they're all stymied by the language in the statute, unfortunately. So this is where we are. But I do think that a technical memorandum is going to be absolutely essential. For one thing, it'll get around the fact that this is not in TAS, at least help that. I still think it ought to be added to TAS at some point, but a couple of things, for example, besides the term paved, and whether you want to have that as an amendment to this or have it in the technical memorandum, which I think would be appropriate as well, but that's not my call, whatever you think. But also I note that in 502 of TAS, it talks about the access aisle shall be marked so as to discourage parking, and there's actually an advisory note that says the method and color of marking are not specified by these requirements, but may be addressed by state or local laws or regulations. It could be that marking at no parking as required here could be acceptable as marking the space and nothing else, no stripes would be required. That should be addressed in technical memorandum as well, to clarify what is and is not acceptable in terms of marking. So that's just my thoughts on that.
This is Brian Sargent. I got another question. Who enforces the state law?
Depends on, this is David Gonzalez, depends on which state law you're referring to. If it's, so there's also Texas Transportation Code listed in this particular statute. That would not be us enforcing those particular requirements. We enforce Chapter 469, so we have jurisdiction over Chapter 469.
This is Brian Sargent again. If this is a state law, wouldn't all the local municipalities have to align their laws with this law?
Anybody that's subject to Texas Transportation Code, I'm not familiar with all the Texas Transportation Code requirements. I do recall the Texas Municipal League was a contributor to the input regarding these bills at the beginning.
Do we as a department or this organization that we are, do we have any responsibility to actually respond to this? This is a state law that needs to be enforced by state authorities, and I'm not sure this has anything to do with TAS. It's a state code. It's just like the 306 laws about carrying guns, concealed weapons in places. That's not a local code, and that's not enforced by the local authorities. All I'm saying is that are we getting into this? Is this outside of our purview?
This is David Gonzalez with TDR, so we do have responsibility in the statute under Chapter 469 where it specifically requires under Chapter 469 for us to do our part.
But this is about parking violations. It's not about, I'm not sure it's about accessibility. We have rules in place currently that are enforced through inspections. Again, I don't know who's going to enforce this. Who's going to write a ticket?
This is David Gonzalez, TDLR. I believe that the expectation is local government would be enforcing those particular requirements for those that would be violating the parking.
So this will ripple through down to local laws.
Oh, yes.
Mike Olson, that's why I brought it up, because in the end, the local AHJ is going to be the one that's going to enforce this.
Or not.
Or not.
Depending on their
We're gonna have
resources. And
John Rickard, so this actually came up in some discussions when we were drafting the proposed language, and the question had to do with fines and towing, and specifically says the consequences of fines and towing have to be identified, but we don't have anything in a task that cover fines and towing, but local jurisdictions may. So all the legislature said was you have to tell people there might be fines and towing, but the local jurisdiction who adopts a law or an ordinance that requires a fine, that applies a fine or allows towing for violations, they're the ones who are actually going to be enforcing it. All we're being asked to do by the legislature is to provide a warning to them that that might happen, because the local jurisdiction might not. Correct.
That is correct. So in the break, we had crack staff getting on that email address. Chairman, you were asking for where we would send it. It's erule, E-R-U-L-E, .comments@tdlr.texas.gov. That's what will be posted with the Texas Register. When it's time to receive public comments on what we put out there for consideration, that's where it will be sent, to erule.comments@tdlr.texas.gov.
Thank you, David.
Thank you. Appreciate your staff.
Mr. Chairman, so are we needing, so if I'm looking at and reading this right, so you're needing a recommendation from us?
Yes.
To go forward to the Texas Register so that we can start that whole process?
Correct.
Well, if that's the case, I would like to make the motion that we move forward with this as it is written, and we can figure out all the little stuff through public comments that are gonna come in, and then we can review all them and maybe look at them and say, okay, they answered what we came up to, and we'll go from there. So I make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Yes, second.
We have motion and second. All in favor of moving forward with the bill as currently written, with possible amendment after the public comment period? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I oppose, say nay.
Nay.
Okay, we have one nay. Looks like we have approval
Great.
on the proposal.
Great. Thank you.
And let's see. That takes us to recommendations for agenda items for the next committee meeting. Ladies and gentlemen of the board.
Mr. Chairman, Mary Winston, one, of course, agenda item will be public comments received from this, and we will flesh it out even more, as Mr. Olson was saying. So that's going to be one agenda item. We'll go back to this rule, and we will take into consideration public comments and further discuss at that time.
This is David Gonzalez, TDR. Also, the public comments received on the other rule that was proposed about maintaining the department and the work group's advisory board to pursue technical memorandums. Remember, we're changing that one word. That's being proposed as a rule. We still have to get feedback on that as well, so just keep that in mind.
All right.
John Rickard, I'd like to suggest that we even work towards drafting a technical memorandum in anticipation of this, so that it can be approved at the same time as the rule, so there's not a lag where people look at the rule and have no idea what it means, or not even aware of it because it's not readily available.
Mr. Ricard, this is David Gonzalez, TDLR. I don't think there's anything that prohibits it. Help me, staff. Do we already have work groups in place, existing work group, with the current staff?
It depends on.
Norman, we can't hear you, you know that.
I guess it depends on the makeup of the committee. I'm assuming Mr. Pierce, Norman Kiki, Mr. Pierce is still part of the committee.
Okay, so there is an advisory board work group already assigned for rules and technical memorandums.
And procedures.
Okay, so we can actually be contacting them in between the period.
Yeah.
So yes, we can do that.
All right.
And John Rickard, and I think Brian had a concern about the technical memorandum process too, that wouldn't on this agenda, maybe we need to make sure that gets on next time as well.
If we can report on it, what we should do is just report on it, leave it on the agenda, so I don't get all worked up.
Report status on technical memorandum for Mr. Sargent.
Well, Mary Winston, TDLR. Mr. Sargent, you made it a wonderful first meeting for Jessica.
I'm not done yet.
Oh, she's happy to accommodate.
Are there any other recommendations for the next meeting?
Yes, I have two, Brian Sargent. I'd like to propose a revision to the current kitchen knee-hole memorandum and a new memorandum for the tow reach range at lavatories and sinks.
Mr. Sergeant, I don't want to ruffle your feathers anymore, but if you could speak directly into
sorry.
that microphone so we can all get it.
Revise, suggestions to revise the kitchen knee-hole technical memorandum. It's very difficult to understand. And there's a clarification required for the tow reach range on lavatories and sinks that I've prepared that I'd like to get, because it's not being enforced consistently or at all. I'd like to get before the board for their comment.
This is David Gonzalez, TDLR. It'd be appropriate for us to go ahead and send those materials to the tech memorandum work group prior to the agenda item being done.
Okay.
So whatever you have, go ahead and forward to staff.
Okay. Any other recommendations for the next meeting? Okay. Let's move on to discussion for date, time, and location for the next meeting. The public comment period, it's obviously has to be after the closure of the public comment period and everything like that.
So it's posted,
David, if you got
this is
any
David
ideas
Gonzalez,
here?
TDLR. It's posted with the Texas Register. There's 30 days of public comment period. I'm not sure what the timeline is for all of our other statutory bills and rules. So I'm looking down to my general counsel to see if there's a target date.
So we have, this is Jessica Escobar, so we have a tentative calendar put together to build in all of those timelines, review, allow us time to get back and review all of those comments. And what I've been given is a tentative week of March 23rd for our next meeting. This allows us sufficient time to get those rules put out there, come back, get everything out to you before the meeting. So it is a ways out, but we definitely want to make sure we have everything done, and that way you're coming back and have something to review.
I'm out of town that week.
And it also allows us to get the work groups to meet as well.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to
So-
be that week, it can be the week after.
Week after is better for me.
If that doesn't come out to any time during the week of March 30th.
March 30th sounds good to me.
March 30th is fine.
That date is currently available, March 30th, if y'all would like to go forward with that one.
I think so. Everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Let's shoot for the 30th of March. I'm assuming 10 o'clock, and this room here.
As the chair advises. So let it be written, so let it be done.
10 o'clock?
Oops, hang on. What's that? Okay. I think that just about does it. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And seconded. This meeting is adjourned.